Okay. Thank you very much for that introduction. And my name is Mari Maruyama with Oberlin Gakuen Foundation of America. I am based in Seattle, Washington, and I thank everyone for participating in today's webinar. I especially would like to thank Mary Walshok and Nancy Hellerud, who will be speaking to us on some of the unique, diverse operations of U.S. universities. Just a little bit of background. As you may know, U.S. universities have various income sources, and some are similar to Japanese universities, of course, and some are uniquely American. As you can see, we have listed here several public research universities: University of Michigan, Washington, University of California, San Diego, University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, and we have added a couple of private liberal arts college information as well: Oberlin College and Conservatory in Ohio, and Carleton College in Minnesota. And for your reference, we have listed financial sources of Nagoya University. As you can see here, obviously there is a wide range of revenue amounts from the University of Michigan, with a great amount of money. And as you can see from the chart, quite a bit of their revenue comes from their medical care system, 51%. And of course, the private universities, private liberal arts colleges don't have medical facilities, so they receive obviously no revenue from healthcare. But from this chart, you can see that both Oberlin and Carleton receive quite a bit of their revenue from tuition sources, whereas the research universities, as you can see, it's not quite as high, but they do receive quite a bit of money from state and federal government with their research grants, and as well as state appropriations. Some diverse and unique academic operations of U.S. universities include, of course, collaboration research with industries and intellectual property licensing. There's also various startups that universities will support, and some of that revenue does trickle back to the universities. Extension services to local industries. So agricultural, for example, they might provide advice and might receive some kind of revenue from that. Today, we will be hearing from two other type of sources: extension programs to non-traditional students, which we'll hear from Dr. Walshok, and international branch campuses, which you will hear from Dr. Hellerud of Webster. Thank you. That's a basic summary of what we hope to achieve on today's webinar. And we hope that you enjoy and can share what your universities would like to achieve. Thank you.
背景のご説明ありがとうございました。引き続き最初の講演に移ります。講師は UC サンディエゴ Extended Studies Former Dean の Mary Walshok 先生です。The first lecturer is Dr. Mary Walshok, former Dean of UC San Diego Extended Studies. Now, please give your attention to Dr. Walshok.
The next one, please. What I would like to do is give you some history. Japan, of course, has millennial of history, many thousands of years. California's history is only about 200 years. But it is important to understand that American public universities were shaped by our unique history. And it was a history that was built on waves of immigration, as well as westward expansion across the United States. So all the cowboy and Indian movies, which we no longer think so highly of, do represent a push by Europeans in particular to settle this vast continent. It is important to know that in the 19th century, the US government, through specific legislation, created incentives for this westward movement. They gave grants of land in the new territories to universities, to set up universities that would help build the industrial and agricultural capacity of their region. And this is a very important historical driver of the work that I do. But there are three other historical drivers. Back in the early 19th century, and even and well into the mid 20th century, there was a role that universities played before television, before telephones, before radio, in organizing learning societies, intellectual gatherings where people learned about history or learned about Shakespeare, in the small libraries or the small public schools that were in many of the territories that the country was serving. So in addition to the very practical agricultural and technical arts, throughout the 19th and early 20th century, there was private support for outreach in history, humanities, and the arts. Both of these targeted primarily to adults, not to young undergraduate students. After World War II, there was a very, very significant funding, again, to help adults, men and women in their 20s and 30s, return to college or come to college for the first time. And there was significant scholarship and financing aid to these adults so that they could get degrees or certificates to be effective citizens and workers. And also historically, in 1976, then Senator Walter Mondale from Minnesota initiated what was known as the Lifelong Learning Act. So as early as 1976, from our perspective, the federal government endorsed and supported the idea of lifelong adult learning, not just for leisure, but for preparation for work and for adaptation in the workplace, or to be ready for new kinds of jobs in new industries. The next slide. So this history was very important to setting up the University of California, because the University of California at Berkeley was one of these land grant colleges after the Civil War that were established in the 1860s. And from its earliest establishment, in fact, free public education through higher education is a part of the Constitution of the state of California. This commitment to agricultural and industrial education, as well as further and lifelong learning for adults, was embedded in the university's culture. There are wonderful stories of professors of Shakespeare coming into the farmlands in sometimes in horses and buggies, sometimes in the new cars, to give talks and lectures at libraries and schools and churches in the summer and often on the weekends. So all of the campuses of the University of California, UCLA, Berkeley, Davis, with whom I noticed you've had a research partnership, my campus, San Diego, have this cultural history behind them. Next slide, please. I share this cultural history with you because when I am with my European colleagues, there is not an equivalent history in Europe to that in the United States. So now let me use the rest of my short talk to tell you about San Diego. Because before there was an independent University of California, San Diego, which was actually founded in 1960, for over 40 years, the university system, primarily managed by the Berkeley campus, which you well know, before World War II and during the war, and the UCLA campus, provided the kind of agricultural assistance, teaching and engineering education for adults, for practitioners in the city of San Diego and around the county. And this was funded partially by the federal government, partially by the state, to assure across the lifespan, Californians would be educated to grow a great economy. Next paragraph, please. In 1960, a new campus, actually 3 new campuses of the University of California were established, all 3 of which I think you know and respect well. UC Santa Cruz near the Silicon Valley, UC Irvine in Orange County, and UC San Diego in La Jolla, which is part of the city of San Diego. And each of these universities, from the day they opened, hired a dean of extension to report to their local chancellor to carry on this tradition of teacher, engineering, and enrichment education targeted to college graduates or everyday citizens. These organizations on the research campus also did things such as Peace Corps training and international studies, about which you will hear more from the next presenters. But English language programs and foreign study programs were initiated on many of these campuses in the late 1940s, 50s, and 60s, and sort of exploded in the 70s, 80s, and 90s. 5 of the University of California campuses have medical schools. All 5 have very large continuing medical education operations. As I say to my friends, now that I am 80 years old, some of you can see the balloons in my office. I don't want a brain surgeon taking care of me who hasn't studied the brain for 25 or 50 years, right? We expect our surgeons, our engineers, our teachers, our finance experts to be fully up to date. And in order to do that, you have to create continuing education programs. Also, there is an increased demand for college level skills across the country, but especially in California, in engineering and technical fields. So there are growing numbers of actual degree programs, as well as certificate programs, that support adults to return to college at age 30 or 40 or even 50. And the San Diego campus, in the tradition of the Berkeley professors in their Model T Fords back in 1910 and 1920, who went out to the farmlands to give lectures. Modern university extensions continue to have public forums on topical issues. The current important issue, of course, here in California and the United States is race relations, climate change, issues of adapting to new media and new technology. And the extension divisions often organize events that attract. Tonight, I'm going to one where we have 60. Last week, I was at one that had 300 people. Next slide, please. Now, I was asked to give you a sense of the evolution and also the economics and governance, how these are financed, these activities are financed and governed. So let me begin by telling you that over the last 50 years, university extension is increasingly being tied not just to the need of the adult learner, but the important needs for society to change, for industry to change, for democracy to survive under changing circumstances. So extension programs have assumed a much more activist role in regional economic development, targeting innovation and entrepreneurship. The division I led created a very large program called Connect, which brought academics, entrepreneurs, and investors together to build clusters of technology and life science companies through many encounters and seminars and technical assistance programs. But another major thrust for these extension programs as we move into the 21st century has been the importance of a technology and science workforce, a workforce that is competent in technology and science. And so a lot of curriculum has been developed to support the need for regional talent pools in engineering, life sciences, teacher education, management, and leadership. And most of these are continuing education programs, helping the engineer at Qualcomm, helping the biologist at a company like Illumina constantly upgrade and increase his or her skills. And universities, and thank you so much for the earlier slide on the sources of funding for universities in general, because in the United States, as universities are securing less and less support from state and funds, they need to attract students and donors. So enhancing the university's visibility and reputation locally and nationally is very important. And at UC San Diego, it led us to actually create a television and online information service that picks up lectures and events, which today reaches about secures is a better word to say, about 5 million downloads monthly. So people are going to Google, to YouTube, to Roku to access information in the health sciences, in the humanities, in the social sciences, in politics and public affairs. And this is also accomplished through conferences and events. Next slide. So how do the universities do this? I mean, how is it funded and how is it operated? Oh dear, I need to tell you a little more about what we're doing. I got ahead of myself. My apologies. I'd like to describe 3 more activities before I answer that other question. Many of you know the long history of immigration to the United States, and it began with early migration across the territories, which became the United States. And what the United States is experiencing is a larger and larger percentage of first generation and previously marginalized communities who lack the education and academic experiences that will prepare them for college or technical careers. So this has become a very high priority for public research universities, and Extension is a very valuable partner, particularly in preparing pre-college youth to be qualified for engineering and science programs at universities. Two other things that we continue to do, contributing to the arts and humanities in the community, and also most recently, often being the center of online learning programs which attract students from around the world. I retired this July 1, and in this past year, we had 100,000 enrollments in university extension classes and certificate programs. 80% were online, and they were students from all over the world accessing the research and advanced knowledge resident on a campus such as ours. Now, finally, how do we do it? Next slide, please. I wanted you to see this range of activity because I think of special interest to all of you, my colleagues in Japan, and certainly in the work I've done in the Middle East and across Europe, is how you govern and finance this kind of work. The traditional university relies heavily on the professor as the center of knowledge and the center of delivery. But the kinds of activities I've described to you need to be co-developed with professors, practitioners, and users of knowledge. And so you have very different kinds of academic planning processes, as well as curriculum review committees. There are institutionalized approval mechanisms for what are known often as non-credit courses and certificates, which means they're not core to an undergraduate degree, perhaps in biology, but they're essential to working in the biological sciences across the lifespan if you have a degree in biology. So over the years, advisory committees, curriculum development committees that include employers and practitioners, as well as professors, develop the curriculum. And then the curriculum and certificate programs or degree programs that they promote go through an institutionalized approval mechanism, which includes the academic senate, but not the state government, because of the third point. Most of these programs, the vast majority, are not state funded. They are fully tuition based. They are often enhanced or augmented by contracts and grants from governments or from employers. Our extension division did millions of dollars of business, if I may use that term, with Qualcomm, providing them with advanced continuing education and in engineering. And also, you all are aware of the very large community of philanthropy in the United States and the tradition of philanthropy. And so many programs that we do, especially in the arts and humanities and in public understanding of science or of civics education, are underwritten by philanthropic support. So in sum, the business model, if you will, includes tuition, contracts, grants, philanthropic underwriting, and increasingly in the United States now, there are at the regional, state, and federal level scholarships that students can apply for to help offset their tuition costs. Next slide, please. The governance and financing model allows for very innovative formats for the university to be able to do on-site corporate and organizational education and to use a variety of new and evolving technologies. It's like we're the R&D for the university, in terms of education delivery and content. A colleague of mine says extension is the test kitchen. It's where you test different technologies, new and emerging curriculum, which often becomes part of the permanent university. That curriculum must reflect the characteristics of the campus in terms of its main academic thrusts and its quality standards. However, it's done so in the context of assuring continuous learning across a person's career and lifespan, which was so passionately advocated by Senator Mondale in 1976. And finally, I think of interest to the Japanese, because we, like you now, have an increasingly growing and aging population. And so you've seen across America, at Harvard, at Yale, at UC San Diego, at small liberal arts colleges, a variety of learning in retirement programs. They're proliferating around the United States, and they too tend to be fee-based or philanthropy-based. So on any day on the UCSD campus, you may have as many as 400 or 500 retirees who are taking courses, some of them from the regular curriculum, some of them through communities of learning that have been established just for them. The next slide. And I think this is my concluding slide. Just to, in conclusion, give you a sense of what this represents. Today, University Extension at UC San Diego serves 100,000 learners annually. It's a very large number. Today, University Extension is home to a wide array of executive management and certificate programs, but I'm finishing a book that points out that the character of the executive management and certificate programs are often very relevant to the regional economy, as well as to new and emerging technology sectors. So for example, I worked on a book with Stanford University Press, which may be of interest to all of you, on the role of the University of California in the state of California's economy. And we discovered that the wine industry, right, in Napa Valley, up in the Bay Area, 80% of the enologists and the professionals working in that industry were trained at UC Berkeley. If you look at the film industry and entertainment and media in Los Angeles, very large percentages of the people have been educated and trained at USC, a private university, and UCLA. On my campus and in our region, most of the life science and technology companies have large numbers of graduates from our campus. And as I said earlier, the business model for all of this is fee-based and supported by corporate grants and philanthropy. The year I retired, the annual revenues, earned revenues, we call them, was approximately $50 million. About 15% of which was returned to the campus, but the vast majority of which was used to deliver this kind of lifelong learning that I believe is going to be core to all societies and all economies moving forward. Next slide. I hope I didn't take too much time. I thank you very much. My email is there if you wish to follow up with questions.
Thank you for your enlightening talk, Dr. Walshok. Learning about history is an important part of moving forward, growing in the future. We look forward to using the information you provided us with to upgrade and improve our universities. それでは引き続き本日2人目の講演に移ります。講師は Webster University Vice President for Academic Affairs の Nancy Hellerud 先生です。The second lecturer is Vice President for Academic Affairs of Webster University, Dr. Nancy Hellerud. Now, please give your attention to Dr. Hellerud.
Thank you very much. I'm very glad to be here, and thank you so much for running the slideshow for me. Can I just do a check on sound? Can somebody confirm that you can hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, thank you so much. So as I said, I'm very glad to be here. I am from Webster University. I'm the Vice President for Academic Affairs. I work on our main campus in St. Louis, Missouri, doing support for our students and faculty, academic advising, faculty development, academic resources, study abroad, but I'm all accreditation work, but I'm also the person who oversees our international branch campuses. And so that's what I'm glad to talk with you about today. Next slide, please. So very briefly, in the next few minutes, I'll give a brief overview of Webster, including a couple of the points that Mari was talking about earlier with models of universities. I'll then, we'll do a really quick tour around the world to see Webster's international branch campuses. We have 8 of them. We'll talk a little bit about part of our focus on student and faculty global mobility, which we feel is the attractor to our university for students who want to have these international experiences. And finally, I'll talk a little bit about how our online operations integrate and help us with our global network. So next slide, please. All right. So a brief overview of Webster, all of Webster, large Webster. Our main campus is in St. Louis in Missouri. We are a private nonprofit university, so more like the model that Mari showed earlier of universities that are primarily dependent on tuition as a source of revenue. We have about 10,000 students who are studying here in the United States, but also at our international branch campuses in Europe, in Asia, and in Africa. We are a master's level institution, meaning that our category is an institution that grants bachelor's and master's degrees primarily. We do offer some doctoral level programs, but primarily we grant bachelor's and master's degrees. We have a robust online learning operations, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. We are accredited in the United States by the Higher Learning Commission, one of the regional accreditors, and we have been so since 1925. So our US accreditation with the Higher Learning Commission, or the HLC, covers all of our programs at all of our locations outside the US, inside the US, online, etc. And so that's a very important piece, I think, of what we think about when we look at countries where we would like to be located. And that is, are there students who are interested in a US accredited institution, but more likely to study in their home country or in another country than in the US. We also, in some of our locations, in addition to the US accreditation by the Higher Learning Commission, we also have the local country accreditation. So for example, in Vienna, Austria, our campus has the Higher Learning Commission accreditation and also the Ministry of Education of Austria's accreditation. In our campus in Ghana, in Africa, we have, of course, US accreditation, and we also have Ghanaian accreditation. So for me, because I work a lot with accreditation, it's sometimes like having dual citizenship in some of those countries. And we see this dual accreditation as an advantage for our students who study there, because then they're able to seek jobs and able to tell their employers that they have both a US accredited degree and a locally accredited degree. We run our courses on 16-week semesters, and we also have some 8-week term offerings that are primarily for our graduate programs. And as you can see, our mission statement includes for us the important words of global citizenship. Next slide, please. So our main campus is in St. Louis in Missouri. Actually, it's in a smaller town, a suburb called Webster Groves. There's a photo of that building. I am sitting in that building right now, and it's a little bit darker outside than it looks on that photo. Here on our main campus, we have 6 colleges and schools, and we offer over 100 degree programs. We have between 3,000 and 4,000 students on this main campus. About 700 of them are undergraduates, primarily living in our dormitories. And I've listed here some clubs, organization, and support that we have for our international students. We, now that COVID is over, we've been fortunate to have a lot of international students come to study with us this fall. So we have over 400 international students on our campus. Obviously, for US universities, there are at least two ways to internationalize your student body. One is to recruit students to come from other countries to study in the US. So we do that, and that is pretty common. But we also have this other part where we go to other countries and establish our branch campuses there. Next slide, please. All right. So let me talk a little bit about our international branch campuses and locations. These students right here are in the front of a building that became our campus in Vienna, and we'll see a better photo in a minute. So next slide, please. So all of our international branch campuses and locations, of which we have 8, have some things in common. They all have American style programs. All the courses are delivered in English. We have some common programs that are the same at all of our campuses: business administration, international relations, psychology, communications, general education. Each of the campuses also has a kind of a special or distinctive group of programs that they offer perhaps only at their campus. And part of that is really looking at the market or looking at the population of students in that country and what they and their parents and their employers would like people to study. All of our programs at our campuses come from one academic catalog. So here at the main campus, we have one catalog, and every program that we offer is in there. And that is because our US accreditor requires that we offer consistent academic programs and experiences to our students. So you can imagine that that's a little bit challenging for us to ensure that our business administration program in Vienna is like the business administration program here and has the same learning outcomes as the business administration program in Uzbekistan and all of the other places that we are. People often ask me about the students at our campuses. They might ask, for example, at your campus in Switzerland, are the students Swiss or are they from the United States? Are they American? And the answer is yes, and more. Most of our campuses have a really diverse mix of students who come from the country, come from US, and come from all other places. So in Geneva, for example, we have about 80 to 85 countries represented. 10 to 15% of the students are Swiss, 10 to 15% of the students are American, and the other 70 to 80% are from all over the world. And we'll also have visiting study abroad students there from Webster or from some of our partners. The faculty, for the faculty, it's the same thing. Our faculty are very diverse in terms of the countries that they represent in all of our locations. There are some nationals of the country where we are located. There are international faculty from all over, and there are often several visiting faculty. Next slide, please. All of our campuses have student housing, either right on the campus or nearby in student homes. We have study abroad and student affairs at all of our sites. And that is because, of course, they take care of their students there, but you can imagine that if we have students wanting to go from another country into Switzerland, you need somebody who's an expert in Swiss visas rather than US visas. And so we make sure that we have services for students at all of our campuses. We also offer English as a second language at our campuses. It depends on the campus, what kinds of ESL they offer and what levels they offer. If the need is great at a campus, we'll have more English as a second language. If the need is not so great, we'll have less of it. Next slide, please. So very briefly, this is the first campus. Our oldest campus is in Geneva. Geneva is a wonderful city full of international organizations. So you can imagine that studying anything related to international is wonderful there. We have about 250 students. That's a picture of our campus. Our specialty programs in Geneva are things like human rights, refugee studies, migration. We have a center for creativity and innovation, and we have a very nice campus that's close to the to Lake Geneva. So why did we go to Geneva? And the answer is we were invited. Long ago, before 1978, a number of people living in Geneva, Americans, who were attached to the United Nations or international organizations, were looking for a US accredited institution to come to Geneva so that their children and others could receive a US education. And so Webster said yes and created the campus in Geneva. Next slide, please. These are just a few other photos from our Geneva location. You can see the lake and the mountains in the distance from the campus, and then some photos of inside our campus and one photo of a place where we sometimes house our students. Next campus, please. Next slide, please. Our next campus, established in 1981, was in Vienna, a beautiful city, not as expensive as Geneva. We have about 400 students there. Some specialty programs there include psychology. We have a nice psychology neuroscience lab there. Our students participate in the Model United Nations, and all of our visiting students are invited for that. We do some very special study abroad programs in music and art. Vienna is a perfect city for that. And in about 8 years ago, we moved to a new location close to the downtown, which is a nice location. Next slide, please. So here you can see our campus outside the white building and inside kind of a courtyard, and then some photos of students at our campus in Vienna. Next slide, please. We are also in the Netherlands, an old university town there, Leiden. We have about 200 students. Programs there include education. We have some volunteer opportunities. It says the Bilgemer Project. That's a special project looking at human trafficking. One of our faculty members there leads that project, which is interesting for students. It's a location between The Hague and Amsterdam and right along the canals. The students there are standing in front of our housing in Leiden. Next slide, please. And that's our campus in the upper left. You can see the little Webster University on the top, and there's some photos from the campus, the neighborhood, and our graduating class. Next slide, please. We are, the last campus in Europe is in Athens. You can see one of our buildings there. It's a smaller campus. And as you might imagine, in addition to the degree seeking students there, it's very popular for our study abroad students simply because of the things that you can see and learn in Greece about history, archaeology, beautiful sights to see, etc. Next slide, please. This is our, the students in the white t-shirts are in our other building, and they're standing so that you can see the little edge of the Acropolis behind them. This is a campus that's popular with Greek American families in the United States. They would like their children to return to Greece, learn some language, visit their grandparents, and have an educational experience in Greece before returning to back to the US. Next slide, please. We are in Ghana in Africa. We opened there in 2014. It is also a small campus. Some of our specialty programs include Africana Studies and West African Dance. A lot of volunteer opportunities and field trips and site visits in Ghana. Next slide, please. That's our campus, the blue buildings up on the left. A couple of photos of things happening at the campus, and that's our staff from Ghana that are in the bottom right-hand corner. Next slide, please. So Webster Tashkent, it's a very interesting project that we worked on in Tashkent in Uzbekistan. One of our partners there was the government, the Ministry of Education in Uzbekistan, which helped us to find a place for a building, and they are managing many of the facilities for Webster Tashkent, which is good, so that Webster as an educational institute, we can put our attention to the academic side of what we do and not have to worry about things like facilities and paint and security and things like that. We opened it just in 2019, but it very quickly became our largest campus. This slide says 2,500 students, and I can tell you that today we have 3,000. It's just turned out that in Uzbekistan, people are very interested in receiving a US degree, but the challenge of coming to the US, paying the US tuition is challenging. And so it's working much better for us to offer our programs directly in Tashkent at a market price for tuition that's appropriate for students who are there. The most popular programs are in education, teaching English to speakers of other languages, and economics. Uzbekistan has a very large population of young people, and so they are looking to train many teachers of English, for example. Our first graduating class is going to graduate next spring. You can tell if they started in 2019, by next May, those bachelor students will be ready to graduate. Next slide. And here are some, one picture of Tashkent and then some pictures of our campuses. When I first saw the campus, I thought it looked a little bit like a hotel, but it's not. It's Webster University's campus in Tashkent. Next slide, please. We have programs in 2 cities in China, and this is a little bit different model. Rather than having our own building, we are actually partnering with other universities and offering our programs, only one program, the MBA, on the campuses and in the facilities of a partner institution. So in China, we have 2 partners, one in Chengdu, one in Shanghai. We have about 250 students total, and we offer the MBA, and that's all. Next slide, please. So a few photos of our locations in China, and one of our graduating classes from Chengdu, and the other graduating class I think must be from Shanghai. Next slide, please. And finally, our newest branch campus, as you can see from the years, it's a model that we continue to develop because it's worked very successfully for Webster. Our newest campus is in the Republic of Georgia, in the city of Tbilisi, and that is launching on in October of 2022. So next month, I will be going to Georgia to welcome the first students who will be studying at Webster University, Georgia. We have a partner there, so we are located, we have a couple floors of a building on the campus of our partner university, BTU. We're going to start with programs in business administration, international relations, and media studies, because that is what the market there appears to be attractive to students and employers. And we are not doing study abroad there yet, simply because we need to get the other pieces started. Next slide, please. So here's some photos of Tbilisi. Looks very clean and empty because it was before any students were there, of course. Next slide, please. So a little bit about our student and faculty global mobility, and then I'll end up with our online operations. So next slide, please. So for us, student global mobility is very important, and it's part of the reason that we have the international campuses and part of the reason that makes them successful. We really encourage our Webster students to study abroad, and we're pretty successful in having our undergraduate and some of our graduate students study abroad as well. Next slide, please. We have 3 types of programs. Students can study at our international campuses, and that's a wonderful experience. So we might have, this fall, we'll have students coming from Ghana to study here. We might have students going from Vienna to Uzbekistan, students from Uzbekistan going to Vienna. It's a real network of exchange and mobility, which is really wonderful for the students. We also have international exchange partner programs. You can see the list of countries there: Japan, Spain, Argentina, Mexico, Belgium, Germany, Norway, the UK, Italy, places where we do not have a campus, but our students, of course, are very interested in visiting and studying. And finally, we have some short-term faculty-led programs. Next slide, please. We also have a program, and for a university that is dependent on tuition revenue, it's important for us to think outside of the box a little bit. And so one program we have is called WINS, Webster International Network of Schools. So we have partnerships with about 60 schools in the United States, and those schools use our international campuses for their study abroad opportunities. In other words, if you go to one of our international campuses, you will meet students from all universities from all over the United States. They are not Webster students, but they are visiting us on study abroad. And it's a real advantage for them because they don't have a challenge with transferring credit. We help them with the visa opportunities, et cetera. So many of our partners find this a very efficient and cost-effective way to do study abroad. And of course, it's wonderful for us because we get a great diversity of students and we get some revenue for that time that the students are visiting us. Next slide, please. And then finally, with mobility, it's important for the students. It's also important for the faculty. So we have different programs where we encourage our faculty to also travel around the global network and have these global experiences. And so, for example, a faculty member who teaches at Webster at the main campus can also go and teach at one of our international campuses for a semester and then return. So we have an office of global mobility, and we keep track and we plan for faculty to move around our system and be able to share their experiences with faculty and with students at our other campuses. And so we're very far away from each other at Webster. So it's important to have people traveling and moving so that we keep this connection across our global network. And the next slide, please. Okay, so one more, please. All right, and our finally, we have our online integration. Webster's had fully online programs for many years, since 1999. Our programs are both asynchronous, like 100% online, or they're synchronous, mostly delivered like through Zoom, the way we're delivering it now. Students at any of our campuses can take an online course, and online has been really wonderful, and Zoom has been really wonderful because we can also connect the students across the campuses, even though they can't always travel to see each other. So for example, we have classes where we might have half the class in Ghana and half the class at a campus in Europe, and they can have the same instructor, or they can have some of their sessions together, and they're able to talk to each other and share experiences and share projects across our global network. We've also used our virtual capabilities to do internships during Zoom. It was a little bit challenging, but we were able to make it happen, and I think we'll continue that. And we also use online to supplement our short-term faculty courses so that students can have a chance to get a lot of sort of education together online before they go on a study abroad opportunity. And the last two slides are just photos. Next slide, please. Yes, this is, I put this up because this is one of our students who is right now in Japan at Oberlin. And I thought it would be fun to end with a photo of one of our students on a partner exchange in Japan. And as Mary said, my email is on there as well, and I'd be happy for any outreach from people in the audience today. So thank you very much.
Thank you for speaking to us today, Dr. Hellerud. It was so exciting to hear about the diverse students and faculties that are at the branch campuses and location of Webster University. We hope to try to increase the range and size of our universities as you have. それでは最後に中別府事務局長より閉会のご挨拶をさせていただきます。
Can you hear me? Okay. First of all, I would like to express my sincere thanks to Dr. Walshok and Dr. Hellerud for sharing on the topics of university extension and international branch campuses. I believe that your presentations will be of great help to Japanese universities that are currently considering setting up a new university-based businesses and extending their reach. JUNBA 勉強会は当初、JUNBA会員と関連機関を対象に開催しておりましたが、コロナ禍の影響で多くの会合のオンライン開催が主流となってきたこともあり、昨年度よりすべて国公私立大学の皆さんに広く参加を呼びかけ、オンラインで開催しております。おかげさまで本日もたくさんの方々に参加していただきました。誠にありがとうございます。今回の参加者の皆さんはほとんどが国立大学法人の方々で、私立大学、特に公立大学からの参加はまだまだ少ないようでした。今後もテーマの設定、さらに広報の方法などを含めて、理事会でよく検討し、私立大学、そして公立大学の皆さんも参加しやすい勉強会を目指したいと考えております。今回は講演がすべて英語ということで、同時通訳を試みましたが、いかがだったでしょうか。英語でのオリジナルの講演につきましては、今後オンラインで録画を公開予定です。ご自身で英語の講演をご確認いただくだけでなく、本日参加できなかった同僚の皆さんにもぜひご紹介いただければ幸いです。なお、 ブレイクアウトルームでの質疑応答につきましては、公開は予定しておりませんので、ご了承ください。冒頭のJUNBAの概要紹介のところでも申し上げましたように、JUNBAでは随時会員を募集しております。JUNBAの会費は無料でございます。会員の皆様にお手元には様々な有用な情報をお届けいたしますので、ぜひともご入会いただければと思います。なお、来年1月に行う予定の第2回の勉強会のテーマは、現在理事会で検討中です。詳細が決まり次第、メール等でご案内いたしますので、次の勉強会にもぜひご参加ください。以上で第1回のJUNBA勉強会を終了させていただきます。本日はどうもありがとうございました。1月の勉強会でまたお会いしましょう。
中別府事務局長、ありがとうございました。アンケートについては、ちょっとスライドを今出します。こちらのスライドに表示されている QR コード、もしくはチャットにお送りした URL よりご回答いただければ幸いです。より良い勉強回答するため、ぜひ、忌憚のないご意見をお願いいたします。本日はお忙しいところご参加いただき、誠にありがとうございました。